We're pleased to be joined by one of the most accurate pollsters in the whole world, Scott Rasmussen. Welcome, Scott.
Great to be with you.
All right, the gloves came off last night, the last debate before the Florida primary on Tuesday. As we record this, a new Super PAC poll shows Mitt Romney up by over 9 over Newt Gingrich here in Florida. Your poll yesterday had Romney up by 8, but an NBC Wall Street Journal poll yesterday had Gingrich up by 9. Please sort this all out for us.
Well, one of the things you have to be really careful about is the timing of all of these polls and the locations of where they were surveyed. In our poll, yes, we show Mitt Romney up by 8 points right now. 3 days earlier, it was Newt Gingrich by 9. It's a 17-point swing. So any polling that was done even partially earlier in the week is going to show better numbers for Speaker Gingrich. Also, polling that is done on a national basis right now will show a little bit better numbers for Mr. Gingrich than the Florida polls, because the Florida polls are where the action is.
What causes these fluctuations?
The reality is Republican voters aren't in love with any of the candidates. Mitt Romney has a base of support. He can't really build on it. He hasn't proven the ability to attract others to support it. So somebody gets presented as an option, and then people say, ooh, there's a problem there. And of course, there's a real concerted attack on Newt Gingrich these days as soon as he jumped in front again, and that just brings his numbers right back down.
Well, we saw what happened. Newt Gingrich went through the roof after his debate performance in South Carolina. How important are these debates in your poll numbers?
The debates are very important. They are the primary means of communications during this nomination process. Newt Gingrich, though, did well, not just because of debates. You know, that sounds very process-oriented, but because he managed to identify and articulate the frustration felt by so many Republican voters. You know, when he picked on CNN and ABC, well, most Republican primary voters aren't looking at those outlets as neutral news organizations. They view them as agents of the Democratic Party. So when Newt Gingrich, you know, throws some dirt on them, people cheer.
How fluid is this right now?
Overall, it's still very fluid. You get, even in Florida, 1 out of 4 voters say they could change their mind before Tuesday, so a lot of room for change. 1 out of 3 Republican voters nationwide say they'd like to see somebody else get into the race. We're going to have time now after Florida. There's about a month of a fairly quiet time where there'll be some reassessing, but there are a couple of constants. Amidst all the volatility, Mitt Romney has consistently been in the number 1 or 2 position always. His vote total is very stable. And right now, the numbers we're seeing for Governor Romney in Florida are pretty much what we saw a few months ago. So his number is likely to stay stable.
Are Newt Gingrich's repeated efforts to tie himself to Ronald Reagan working for him?
They were. You know, this is clearly, Ronald Reagan is the most popular figure, not just in the Republican Party, nationwide. We ask people about different labels that you can apply to a candidate, and if you say a candidate who's like Ronald Reagan, you know, those numbers are off the charts good. However, for Newt Gingrich, those challenges, his claims to be a part of the Reagan Revolution, have come under strong attack, and some of the quotes that are out there very damaging to Speaker Gingrich.
This is the first election cycle since the Citizens United case before the Supreme Court was won. What kind of a role are the Super PACs playing in this primary campaign?
They're changing the whole nature of the race. Newt Gingrich, in an earlier time, would have been out of money after New Hampshire and had no chance to compete in South Carolina. Instead, a Super PAC comes and spends $5 million on his behalf. Instant organization. This is part of a change in America. You know, my grandparents' generation, if they would go on a trip, they would spend a week preparing, and they'd get traveler's checks and everything else because you had to be prepared for the trip. I'd come along and I'd go across country with no money in my wallet because I had a debit card. And we're seeing the same thing happening politically now as well. The candidates that used to have to plan a year or 2 years in advance are finding that advantage wiped out because of the new rules.
Rick Santorum, is he playing the role of spoiler? Should he drop out? And if he did, how would that change things?
Rick Santorum is playing the role of a guy who was briefly the front runner after Iowa. And he retains his personal visibility, the personal popularity of Rick Santorum much higher than it was just a couple of months ago. I don't think there's a particular reason for him to drop out right now. If I was Rick Santorum, I'd be saying, you know what, Romney and Gingrich are going to beat each other up. Voters aren't really sold on either one of them. I'm the only viable alternative. That's what he's hoping for. The challenge, of course, is if he gets that position, he'll be attacked again. Rick Santorum also has a message he wants to get out, and I think that's very important. Too many times analysts say it's only about winning the nomination. A lot of candidates think it's about changing the tone of the dialogue.
Scott, you ever think what's going through Tim Pawlenty's head, whether he wished he hadn't pulled out of it so quickly?
You know, I said that to somebody. I met a supporter of his last night, and I said, boy, I'll bet you that you know, he's kicking himself because Tim Pawlenty could very well be rising to the occasion right now. It's also possible, though, that Tim Pawlenty might have just been another one of those temporary front runners along the way. What is fascinating to contemplate is if somebody jumped in right now, somebody new were to jump in, how would they be viewed? Would they be viewed as just another in a long line of I'm not Mitt Romney candidates, or would they finally be viewed as somebody who, oh, this is the person we're waiting for?
Finally, another Wall Street Journal NBC poll shows Obama leading both Romney and Gingrich by margins outside statistical errors. Now, is that bad news for Republicans? Should Republicans and or conservatives be worried about that?
This election is going to be close. You know, unless the economy either takes off in a dramatic fashion or goes into a double dip recession, we're going to have a competitive race. At Rasmussen Reports, we track the matchups every single day. We show that Romney is trailing the president by 3 points, that Gingrich is trailing by 7. But there's an awful long way between now and November. Ronald Reagan was behind Jimmy Carter after Labor Day. Things obviously changed in that case. One of the factors that goes into this, right now there are some people who are Newt Gingrich supporters who, when we ask a Romney versus Obama question, say, I'm never going to vote for Mitt Romney, so they say some other candidate. And by the way, there are some Romney supporters who say, I'll never vote for Newt Gingrich. So until there's a Republican nominee, those numbers should be seen as sort of a rough benchmark and nothing more.
Scott Rasmussen, as always, thank you so much. Pleasure to see you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.